Welcome to the online AUN-QA training course for accomplishing program assessment version 4.0. For this online course, this is your e-package. You're referring to this PowerPoint handout at this time. You have a number of appendices, 5 of them. Appendix 1 is the guide to AUN-QA assessment at program level version 4.0. Appendix 2 compares version 3.0 to version 4.0. Appendix 3 does a gap analysis of version 4.0. You will be doing a group project for this online course. It will be explained. It is explained in Appendix 4, and in Appendix 5 is your group project brief. All these will be explained to you in due time. There will be 4 coaches for this training. 4 coaches and 32 participants. That makes 8 participants per coach. And for the 8 participants, for each coach, there will be probably about 3 groups of participants, making it 3 participants, 1 group, 3 participants, another group, and then 2 participants, another group, a total of 8 participants per coach. Given that we are doing synchronous learning in this workshop, a number of etiquettes follow. We are using Zoom. Please be sure that you have the Zoom software installed on all the devices that you are using. Please set your name in Zoom to the one that you registered for this workshop. Please familiarize yourself with all the features that you need to use, such as mute, unmute the microphone, videoing, screen sharing, and so on. Please be early for each session. 5 to 10 minutes early. Join in before the workshop starts. That will be good. And when you are not speaking, please have your microphone muted. We would prefer that you show yourself on your video. And for procedural clarity, please use the raise hand button if you wish to speak or if you wish to ask a question. Also, please find a quiet space where there are no interruptions from telephone ringing, family members speaking, and so on, with minimal background noise, audio-wise. Visual-wise, it will be good to have a plain background without any bright lights, such as a bright window, and have the lighting focused on your face so as we can see you clearly. Also, as a matter of procedural clarity, avoid talking as other participants are speaking, such that there will be no clash. Be aware that you would be on camera and avoid doing things such as waving of hands and so on that may be a cause for distraction to the other persons in the e-learning workshop. Later on, you will be provided with information about your group project. Take note of the information, which group you are in, who is your coach, who are your group members, and so on. Because this is a certificate-bearing course, we would be taking attendance twice a day, at least, at the start of the day and just after lunch break. 80% attendance and completion of the group project is required in order to receive the certificate. And lastly, please have a copy of the handout with you throughout the workshop for easy reference. What is our approach in this e-workshop? Well, we're going to be using blended learning. And blended learning simply means there is some amount of online learning, such as what we are doing now. And even online learning, there are multiple forms. You would be viewing some lecture notes and it is recorded, so it is fully one way. Other sessions will be synchronous, meaning it will be live and discussion can take place. Some of the learning is also asynchronous, meaning you do it on your own time, own target. So blended learning will be used in this e-workshop. This workshop will also use a flipped classroom. And flipped classroom, similar to blended learning, merely means part of it is in-class activities. And then it is flipped to be out-of-class activity. Out-of-class activity may be your group of 2 or 3 participants working on your project by yourself. This workshop is also very much collaborative in terms of what you will learn. You will learn from your instructor, but you would learn also from your group project members. So we'll be using blended, flipped, and collaborative learning. And as you can already tell, we're going to be using Zoom. We're going to communicate via email. Many of you would be your university's email address or Gmail. And for very quick communication, we will use WhatsApp chat groups, of which the AUN-QA Secretariat will set up. What are the learning outcomes for this project, for this workshop? At the end of this workshop, participants will be able to first identify the elements of a quality assurance ecosystem. What does a QA ecosystem consist of? What are the elements? What important, and so on. Also, at the end of the workshop, participants should be able to apply the 4A's iterative framework to implement the AUN-QA framework. Apply the 4A's. Participants would also need to understand the AUN-QA framework, what are its 8 criteria and requirements. And for this, you have a whole set of YouTube videos to watch before we meet each other online at the first synchronous session. We hope that you will be able to, at the end of this workshop, perform a gap analysis of a study program, perhaps your study program, such that you can demonstrate to us that you have a good understanding of the AUN-QA program assessment framework. And you demonstrate this understanding to us by having understood the framework. You do a gap analysis using one study program. And a further learning outcome would be to be able to improve quality assurance or QA in the program that you have decided on by actually what's called identifying the gaps, or you have identified the gaps, you know where you're heading, you close the gap so as to be able to achieve to where you are going. Let's begin with some introductory remarks. What is the QA or quality assurance ecosystem? Well, there is IQA and there is EQA. I for internal, E for external. the internal quality assurance system design depends on contextual factors. If we look at the yellow directions, we begin with quality for purpose, meaning inside out. Inside out meaning you begin with internal quality assurance of your academic programs, of the academic programs in your university. That's where it begins with. Every university have probably 50, 100 or more educational programs, and every program is subjected to some degree of internal quality assurance. For many universities, the entire university, the entire institution is also subjected to institutional quality assurance. Institutional QA and program QA cover different aspects. A QA on an academic program is very much about teaching, about research. Those are the two main things. QA for an institution would refer to how you manage a university, how you govern a university, how do you put in place processes and procedures to enhance quality assurance within the entire university. So the focus are on two different wide aspects. Beyond the university, there is national EQA, National External Quality Assurance. Philippines uses PAASQ. Malaysia have their own system, Thailand have their own system, and so on. So it can be done at the national level. It can be done at the regional level. The AUN-QA is an example of a regional external quality assurance system, and the AUN-QA, as the name implies, our customers, our base is all ASEAN countries. And then beyond any region of the world, there is international or global EQA. ABET, Washington Accord, and so on are examples of global or international external quality assurance. And then even beyond that, you consider broadly. You begin with technology, context, social, economical, legal, stakeholder issues that really go beyond any international EQA system. So moving from the inside to the outside, we call it quality for purpose, beginning with a solid QA foundation for each program in a university, a solid QA foundation for the entire university, a solid QA foundation at the country level, at the regional level, and then perhaps eventually at the global level. Okay, that's our meaning of quality for purpose. Now, to flip it the other way around, quality for purpose is simply the opposite way of looking at it, meaning the opposite way, you look at what is needed from a university. What is needed from a university, and then what is needed by the country. Many of us are from public universities, and a public university's mission, vision, and so on is really very closely guided by the needs of the country, the needs of the economy. So you move in that way. What are the needs of the country? The country has a number of public universities. Each university has a slightly different mission, vision, and then from the mission, vision of the university itself, you have the programs within each university. All the programs need to satisfy the requirements of the university because this is taxpayer money. Our programs and so on need to deliver graduates who are able to support certain industries, support national development, and so on. So that is looking at things from an inside-out perspective. Also, part of the QA ecosystem, we can look at it from an external context or an internal context, two views that are opposite of each other. And if we begin with the internal context, every university has a vision, a number of missions, and its culture or its guiding principles. There is the educational philosophy. Every university, every program does a SWOT analysis in order to understand their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And there must be 1 to 5 years or 10-year strategy and goals for the university to achieve what it wants. Every university must have a number of processes and procedures to ensure academic and administrative staff quality. Almost every university engages in research. Every university has a social responsibility, both public universities and private universities. There are also many other factors. These are the elements emanating from within the university that drives its outward achievement. So that is looking at things inside out. At the other end of the scale is looking outside in. What is the global situation? What is the situation of manpower needs in Thailand, in the Philippines, and so on? What are the economic trends? What are the economic needs of any one country? What are the global trends in higher education? What is the country's national education policy? What are the needs of the stakeholders of that country? Pastel factors, political, economic, social, technological, legal, environmental. These are all outside-in factors. ASEAN is composed of a number of different countries with very different outside-in factors and very different inside-out factors. An example is Laos. Last week, there was an assessment of Laos that their state of economic development, the needs of the country, is very different from the mission and vision of, say, a university in Malaysia or in Thailand. The focus on manpower needs, the focus on which type of programs for the public university to be strong in would be different from those of another country. That is Laos. And then Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore, and so on. All their outside in and inside out requirements or factor would be different. Okay, and a quality assurance ecosystem needs to consider all these external and internal factors. Again, on the issue of the QA ecosystem, if we look at the innermost circle is your program itself, each educational program, and there are PLOs or learning outcomes from the program learning outcomes. Sometimes they are also called PEOs or program expected outcomes. In the Philippines, they call it GAs, graduate attributes. Okay, graduate attributes that are needed from graduates of a particular program. And as mentioned, for one university that has any number of programs, 50 programs, 100 programs, and so on, these are all run by the university or by the institution. The next ring on the outside, where we look at things that are functional. Functional things would be teaching, research, and service to the community. Systemic QA, systemic issues would be what are those systems put in place to ensure high quality of output. There is also strategic quality assurance. Things that are strategic would be, what is the governance plan for the university? What is the human resource program for the university? How does it look after its finances and so on? External relations and so on. So that takes place at the institutional level. And again, whereas everything at the program level is in the innermost circle. And in fact, again, beyond the institutional level, we can look at the entire global ecosystem, not just related to one country, but we are all members of a global eco-environment where factors that transcend political or geopolitical barriers need to be considered. Factors of the environment, factors of training global citizens for the future, and so on. A strong QA ecosystem of any university and its program needs to look at these various layers of quality assurance. Looking first at all its program, then looking at strategic and systemic and functional QA of the entire university, and then for the university to be a bit bigger than itself in being able to contribute also to a global ecosystem. We will be using the PDCA and 4A's iterative framework for this workshop. PDCA and the 4A's will be an integral part of everything that you will study in this workshop, what we also call the Tier 1 workshop. The 4A's are these. Look at this as an onion with various layers to be peeled off. The outermost layer is the layer of the approach. You peel that off, you come to align or alignment. After alignment, you peel it off, then you do assessment. After you do assessment, there is the adaptation. Let's look at each layer in turn. At the approach layer, what is the approach? You want to take a local approach, meaning only for your university, may be different from another university in the same country. Or you want to take a national context where you look at a national QA system. Or you want to be ambitious and look at a regional or a global context, such as has been mentioned, ABET Washington Accord, and others. Okay, to take a larger context in a way would be more difficult because you're not only satisfying local requirements, you want to try to also satisfy external and other requirements. At the highest level of approach, you want to take in higher educational developments and trends, world trends, regional trends, national trends, and so on. At the approach level, you want to understand the needs of all your stakeholders, meaning not just the people who hire your graduates, but the government. What does the government need? The government provides funding, but they require jobs of certain kind only. Certain kinds of jobs are much more in demand. Other kinds of jobs are less in demand. Also, at the level of the approach, what is the institutional vision, mission, culture, not to mention its strategies and the resources that are needed. Okay, so that is at the approach level where you've heard of the 5W and 1H. Why are you doing something? What do you want to do? Where? When do you do it? Who within the university would do it? How do you do it? The 5W and 1H factor to the approach is important. You got to decide on all this. For example, someone who wants to look at a global assessment plan. Why do you want to do it? Why do you need global recognition? Is national recognition not enough? Is regional recognition not enough? What is your vision and mission for going for a global approach? Also, part of the global approach in the bottom right hand sector is there would need to be change management. Your staff within the university require some degree of engagement, some degree of convincing in order to take the approach that you're doing, in order to do work. And for the C, which is check, you review your plan, you review your approach. Is it sufficient? Is it too far-reaching? And under A, you improve the plan, you improve the approach. So, for example, having decided on the approach to use, next, you need to align it. Align it with what you can do by doing a gap analysis. A gap analysis of what is it you want to do, where you are now, where you want to get to. Identify the gaps, implement internal quality assurance to close the gaps. That is one of the things we will be doing in this e-workshop. You will have to identify a number of gaps for a program that your group will choose, to identify your current position, and after having studied the AUN-QA program assessment version 4.0, you know what it is, then you would know where you are right now for this particular criteria, where do you want to get to. And there is a gap between where you are and where you want to get to, and for you to at least identify a number of strategy on how to close the gap. Many of you would be part of an initial assessment team where you need to write an SAR, meaning a self-assessment report. And what a self-assessment report basically is writing where you are on these criteria, what are your gaps, what you want to try and do to close these gaps. So by identifying the gaps and implementing internal quality assurance to close these gaps. Okay, and then you move on to the lower left quadrant where you review your internal quality assurance system, you review your self-assessment report, and you review your entire host of data and evidences that tell you where you are right now. You review them, and the next step is really to act to improve on it. We will be using this PDCA and this 4A's approach for your project. What you're hearing right now is merely the introduction to it, and by the next session or so, you should get a better idea of what are the things that you need to do for approach, align, assess, adapt. Okay? So, moving on to assess. Assess is planning your assessment. Who is in your team? You likely are on the team. You and several other members of your department or members from other departments. Who are the members of the team? What are they trying to do? When? The when is now. The when will probably occur over a period of 12 to 24 months, which is usually how long it takes to do an assessment plan for a program assessment. Where do you do it? How you're going to do it? Bottom right-hand quadrant, internal assessment stakeholder, interviews, and so on. Who are your stakeholders? Students, faculty members, or the academic staff, your support staff, your alumni, your employers, and others. You need to be in touch with them, do survey on them, have interviews from them, have their input on curriculum review for your program, for example. You need to have these communication with your stakeholders. And under the C, you need to clarify, review internal assessment findings. You want to improve your IQA system from having written a self-assessment report. You want to see how it can be improved. You check it, and then you go ahead with improving it by submitting an internal assessment report. Some of you may already be at the stage of almost submitting your self-assessment report to the AUN-QA, and you may already have an assigned date for an online assessment, December 2020, August 2022, and so on. The date may have already been assigned, and you may be almost ready to do an assessment. Next, at the deepest level of the onion, is to adapt your adaptation plan from your IQA team, your self-assessment report, what you have found, how you want to improve things, and so on. The 4A's approach is quite detailed. Again, we will be using this process for your group project. For now, this is merely an introduction to what the 4A's process is, an introduction to what the PDCA cycle is. The AUN-QA framework follows very much a PDCA process, follows very much a 4A process. Beginning in 2007, about 15 years ago, we began quality assurance assessment at the program level. Quality assurance assessment of educational programs. And since then, we have completed probably about, I think it's around 700 program assessments. So this is done at the deepest part, the deepest layer of the onion. And the AUN-QA program assessment model is all about a cycle of plan, do, check, act. At the next layer of the AUN-QA framework onion is institutional assessment. So we assess individual programs within a university. We assess also entire universities, entire institutions, which is at a higher level. So basically, I'm saying here that the AUN-QA frameworks follows very much the 4A iterative approach. The AUN-QA system also is evolutionary in that things have improved with the approach, and I could use the word iterative also. Version 0 started in 2004. It was not used. Version 1 was used when the first assessment took place in 2007. Okay, version 1 had 18 criteria. We started using version 2 in 2011. Very much used in 2011 to 2016, where it was reduced to 15 criteria. And then it was further refined in 2016. Further refined to be made more efficient under version 3, where there were only 11 criteria. The latest version, and we are proud that this is taking place, the latest version, version 4, was launched in June of last year. This latest version, let me explain, is based on the following factors. First, it's based on principles, not based on numbers, not based on targets. One example of being principle-based is, you've heard of the term staff-student ratio. To have a specific staff-student ratio, such as 20 to 1, 30 to 1, would be numbers-based, meaning saying that your staff-student ratio must be better than this ratio and so on. That is a numerically based target. To be considered something that is principle-based, you need to understand the underlying purpose. Why 20 to 1? Why 30 to 1? Why not 100 to 1? And so on. The principle behind the decision is more important than the numerical decision itself. Okay, why? I chose the example of staff to student ratio because today it is online teaching. When it comes to online teaching, a specific staff-student ratio really does not make sense anymore. That is the principle. AUN-QA framework for program assessment version 4.0 is also designed to be non-prescriptive. Prescriptive meaning the AUN-QA cannot tell the program what to do. The AUN-QA can only suggest within certain contexts. To be non-prescriptive is to not provide solutions. To provide solutions is to suggest expertise that the person, a doctor can suggest a solution because the doctor is the expert on the illness of what's happening to you. So he tell you, take this medicine instead of that medicine. The AUN-QA does not do that. We are not experts on content. We are experts only on processes and procedures. Okay, so the focus is on process and procedure improvement rather than to suggest that particular solution itself. As I've mentioned, the AUN-QA has completed hundreds of assessments in the past 15 years. Throughout that time, we have done engineering, science, arts, medicine, law, every related program of study. From being standardized across all programs over an evolutionary process, we have come to be more contextualized. Contextualized to understand the needs of any one particular program. Contextualized to understand the needs of a public university, a private university, a university in a particular country. Its needs are different from the university in another country. The needs of a social science program in one university is different from the needs of a social science program in another university in a different country. Put it that way. Okay, that is the meaning of contextualize. Contextualize to the type of degree program, contextualize to the country level, the needs of the country, contextualize to whether it is a public university or private university, contextualize to other factors also. Contextualize also to this factor here. In the past, we have focused mainly on undergraduate education, which is mostly teaching and learning and some degree of research. As you would all know, postgraduate degrees oftentimes are research focused, such as Masters by Research and most PhD program, a whole lot more contextualized to research. Therefore, this latest version of the AUN-QA program assessment framework accounts for research type degree or mainly postgraduate degrees. The latest version of the AUN-QA program assessment is also contextualized to, nowadays there are double degrees, there are twinning programs, there are double majors and so on. It is not merely a single path, one degree program. Okay, so there are concurrent degrees. The AUN-QA program assessment framework version 4.0 is also contextualized to the delivery of concurrent programs. Okay, that's another way of the AUN-QA evolving to be contextualized. The AUN-QA framework, if you've seen from the 9 videos, and you really would need to watch all 9 videos, perhaps multiple times, in order to fully understand what the AUN-QA program framework is all about. And what it is really all about is this. You begin with expected learning outcomes. Every program, every assessment system in this world, without exception, begins with what is expected of the students. What are the learning outcomes expected of the students? And these must exactly match what the stakeholder wants. What are the stakeholders? The employers, the government, the people who fund the university, the people who have a stake in seeing to the good output of the program of the university. It all begins with this, stated in a number of succinct statements, up to 10 statements, 15 statements or so. From these learning outcomes, the program design its structure and content. Structure meaning, what are my first year, second year, third year, and fourth year courses? What do I teach? What teaching and learning approach do I use? Lecture, independent study, problem-based learning, project work, homework, whatever. Okay, what is the teaching and learning methods used? And also, how do I assess my students? Final exam, independent study, project work assessment, and so on. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is having to do with the program, how the program is designed. And then there are the resources. What are the resources provided to a program? Well, the academic staff certainly are a resource. They are the ones who teach. They are all the services, support unique to a university. Course registration is unique to a university. What other services? IT services, dormitory, services for the social environment, and so services for a very conducive virtual environment even. Okay, on campus, off campus, university library, you could be talking about cafeterias and so on. Okay, these are the financial aid service. Okay, these are the services from a university. Every university has building, classroom, teaching lab, research lab, its facilities and infrastructure, all the computers and so on that are used. Okay, so the row in the middle, academic staff, student support services, facilities and structure are the resources provided by the university. Criteria 1 through 7 drive the output of the program, the output of the university. What is the output? The output is the number of students graduated. The output is the number of publications written by the staff for any one period. Okay? Number of students graduated, number of projects completed, number of research papers, and if you want to go further, patents, copyrights, other intellectual property, and so on. Okay? All these drive criterion 8, which is really looking at the achievements of the program. What are all these achievements? And everything takes place within a backdrop of quality assurance. Quality assurance must be embedded into every criteria within the framework. Quality assurance in your academic staff, that they are well trained, that they continue to be trained as they've been lecturing for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Quality assurance in your facilities. Your computers are up to date, your Wi-Fi is fast enough, and so on. Everything must take place within a backdrop of quality assurance, and there is also some degree of benchmarking. Benchmarking meaning you are constantly looking out at what are other similar programs doing. Similar programs in other countries, in other programs, within the same country or in other countries. Okay, you can call it benchmarking, you can call it looking at best practices, you can call it looking at how to improve oneself by looking at the external environment. Okay, that is the AUN-QA framework for program assessment, and surrounding all of this is from your learning outcomes, you plan your courses, your teaching and learning approach, how you want to assess them. You need to do it, and then you check it, and then from your results you improve it. What many of you are doing in this workshop, in writing a self-assessment report and looking at certain gaps, you are actually doing a plan, do, check, act approach. That is the approach that you are using. Now, a more concise way of grouping these 8 criteria is to look at them in the following grouping. 1, 2, 3, 4 would refer to the design of the program itself, how we design the program. Again, these are my ELO. These are all the courses that students have to take from year 1 to year 4. These are the teaching and learning approach, methods, and so on that I use. This is how I assess the student. So we call this the program design or design or just program criteria. Okay, that's on the vertical box on the left. The middle box is again your resources of your academic or teaching staff, your support services, and all the hardware, classrooms, computer, and so on. These are your resource criteria. And finally, they all drive the output criteria. Output criteria of number of students graduated, research projects completed, number of papers published, and so on. Okay. Now, some word about the requirements and a comparison with version 3.0. Again, over succeeding versions, we have sought to streamline, not just streamline, but certain requirements that are more important, we upplay them. Other requirements that we felt over the years had been less important, we downplay them and even remove some of them, such that today there are only a total of 53 requirements, 5 from criterion ELO, 7 from criterion program structure and content, and so on. Looking at the number, 53 requirements from version 4.0. This is a consolidation of the 62 requirements of version 3.0. I would not spend time eking out the difference of version 3.0 versus 4.0, but it does need to be mentioned because right now, at this time, in 2022, we are in a transition period where both version 3 and version 4 apply to any one assessment. Use of version 4 has already started, although in the majority, many programs are still using version 3.0. That's why we are looking or just mentioning some of the difference between version 3.0 versus 4.0. For the present time, both versions are acceptable to be used. Okay, and if you wish to take a deeper look at this difference, you can Google Johnson Ong and Jenny. That they have written one or more paper comparing version 3.0 to version 4.0 of the AUN-QA program assessment. Okay, just a few more slides to show this is the requirement for version 4, this is the requirement for version 3, how they are different. And up to the requirement level, up to a deep level. Okay, to move on, as mentioned, you will do a project. Mainly for the project, you're going to be doing a gap analysis. Gap analysis of where you currently are. The assumption is that there are a number of deficits or there are a number of things to improve, meaning what is your current state. Okay? And again, you are also here because you desire to move into some state for a future, a determined desire of a future state. Okay? Where you are, where you want to move to. Your job for this project here is to identify this gap. How big, how small, what you need to do in order to reach your desired state. And under number 4, maybe there are too many things to be done. This workshop, we realize, is limited in the sense that you spend only so many hours. You know, a team writing the self-assessment report can consist of 5, 6, or 7 academic staff. Each one, or rather a total, they will spend several hundred hours producing the self-assessment report, doing all the gap analysis. you cannot be expected to do an entire self-assessment report. You will prioritize 1 to 2. You will decide what to choose to do as a project for this workshop. Okay? Establish, prioritize your plan on how to close the gap. Identify all the gaps and say, okay, for this project, this workshop, I will look at this gap, I will look at that gap. And then you will try to write a plan to implement an action to close the gap. And then evaluate your results and so on. We do not know exactly how far you can reach in this gap analysis, but at least we can begin the process. And if the project is manageable, of a size that's manageable enough, and please try and remember this number, if everyone can spend, I would say, maybe anywhere between about 10 hours. If you can spend about 10 hours per participant doing this group project, that means if your group has 3 participants, each one spend 10 hours, total of 30 hours, you would be able to arrive at a pretty good gap analysis project after everything has been well defined. So remember this number of about, from the previous batch that we have just done, 10 hours per participant in each group, and the group having 3 participants would be able to achieve a project with pretty good results. Okay, so that's the idea of gap analysis. To put it within the framework of the AUN-QA assessment, gap analysis, the assessors look at all the evidences from your self-assessment report. There will be a site visit to look at the university firsthand. What are your QA practices? What is the system that you have? And to look at all your results. And in order to boil everything down, a rating scale is used for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but let me begin at the 4, because the 4 is a minimum required to pass an assessment. A 4 is considered this: the quality assurance practice to fulfill the criteria is adequate or it is enough, and you have evidence to support that. The evidence must be there. The performance of the quality assurance practice shows consistent result, and this is the minimum level expected. Okay, so a minimum of 4 is required to pass an assessment. Now, let's look at 3. 3 is, okay, you have the QA practice. You have it written down. You even have it implemented, but some paperwork is not complete. You need some documents, and the document is not well written, or you don't know where you file it, or they are not available, and your data gathering process is not so clear and so on, or you use it but you don't use it consistently and so on. So the QA practice to fulfill this particular criterion is there, but you need some minor improvement in order to fully satisfy, in order to fully use this QA practice. So we called it inadequate, but minor improvement will make it adequate. Okay, so this is something just below a 4.0. A couple of things can be done to the practice, taking maybe 6 months, 12 months, you improve things. If that can be done, if that vision is there, if the assessors can see it there, then they will give it a 3. They will give suggestions for what needs to be done for the next 6 months to 12 months in order to bring it up to a 4. Okay, so 3 again would not be a pass, but inadequate but minor improvement can make it adequate. A 2 would be something that is not adequate and improvement is not necessary. So maybe the QA practice is the documentation is not there. You are only at the planning stage. It is not written. Okay? Actually, let's not talk about 2. Let's not talk about 1, because if a program is not ready, not at a minimum at the 3, and willing to spend 6, 12, 24 months to come up to a 4, then there's really no point looking at the IQA of that particular program. A very minimum would be a 4 for some areas. Some areas it may be a 3, but certain things can be done to bring everything up to a 4. Okay, that would be the starting point. So there's a 4. Now, the AUN-QA has seen programs that are 5s, that are 6s. Not many, but there are a few. A 5 would be considered better than adequate. That the quality assurance practice is better than adequate, meaning there is evidence to show efficient implementation, there is good results, there is positive improvement trend. Okay, that hey, I'm improving over the past 3 cycles in terms of my graduation rate. I cut down less and less on dropout. My teaching quality has improved given the student feedback survey that I've used yearly and so on. Okay, so that is better than adequate when improvement trends can be discerned from the program. And higher than 5 would be 6. 6 would be considered best practice. Best practice means there is evidence that other programs, that other university follow my program, follow my university. Okay, that's certainly. If someone follows you, that means you're really good. Okay, that's an example of best practice. Number 6 would be best practice, perhaps at the ASEAN level. Okay, at the level of ASEAN. Number 7 would be best practice or excellence at the world-class level. World-class level, the best in the world. Okay, so this is the numerical gap analysis system that the AUN-QA uses. And for this, again, for your project, what is your current state, where you want to get to, looking at this radar plot on the left, criterion 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You see where you are, you see where you want to get to for each criterion. This is what your self-assessment report would show. But again, your self-assessment report, taking several people, spending several hundred hours to get it done, we are not looking at that for this workshop. For this workshop, we will look at something comfortably up to 10 hours per participant when you do your group project. 10 hours per participant. Okay? And just to further preview, remember, whatever is given in this lecture is introductory. When we meet each other face to face, additional information would be provided to you. Okay? Again, for the gap analysis, you're looking at this table, what is the requirement? For example, 1.1, the program to show that the expected learning outcomes are appropriately formulated according to an established learning taxonomy, and so on. So what you are supposed to do is, what is your gap? What actions would you need to do in order to close the gap? Okay, this would be an example of a gap analysis, but this is only one part of the gap analysis that shows recommended actions. There would need to be, of course, a more detailed explanation. This particular requirement would be the program to show that the expected learning outcomes are achieved by the students by the time they graduate. How do you find this out? You can do exit survey. And you can find that, oh, my exit survey, I only asked a few students, and the percentage of students that answer the survey is very low, which is only about 20-30%. I really need to up my response rate to a minimum of 50% perhaps. So the gap may be, return rate is now 20%. And what you want to achieve is return rate to improve up to 50%. So a gap of improving return rate of 30%. That could be it, okay? So that's an example of gap analysis. Okay, we are moving towards the end of this introductory lecture here. When we meet each other face to face at the first synchronous session, we will go through the activities for all sessions in this workshop. Your group project assignment would be explained to you. Me, Tan Kee Chuan, I'm your lead coach for this workshop. But as mentioned, this workshop would have 4 coaches. Okay, you will be told about your communication with your particular coach. Some of you would be under me, others would be under a different coach. Okay, just to look at 1 or 2 other things ahead of us now. Again, 4 coaches, 4 groups. There are 32 of you. I hope it remains at 32 such that everything will be balanced. 32 participants, 8 participants per group or per coach. And for the 8 of you, we further divide it into 3 participants, 2 participants. Okay? And we try for each group to have a good mixture of different countries so that you can learn from one another and so on. There will be 4 groups. The assignment will be provided to you guys in due time. Okay? Now, the next section on the explanation of the criteria and sub-criteria is something that you would need to study on your own. Please study on your own. What is this? These are the criteria and sub-criteria or the requirements for every criterion. And you are looking at the 5 requirements of criterion 1, expected learning outcome. Okay, so this criterion 1, ELO. Criterion 2, program and structure, where there are 7 requirements. Criterion 3, teaching and learning approach, there are 6 requirements. So this is how all the criterion are explained here. And let me go through each criterion. You're going to see the requirements, the sub-criterion, and there's an addendum to the criteria, because remember I mentioned that we're going to look also at research programs, PhD or Masters by Research. We are going to look at concurrent programs also. Okay, every criterion would look at this addendum. Every criterion would have an addendum. Every criterion would have a system view. This is the system view for expected learning outcome. If you would follow what we went through previously, the system view for expected learning outcome is the context, what the stakeholders want, what the university want, and then from this, university program come up with like learning taxonomy. They classify the learning outcomes. There would be learning outcomes from the program. Below the program, each program has 30, 40, 50 courses. Every course would have a number of learning outcome. Course learning outcome 1, course learning outcome 2, and so on. Every course consists of a number of lectures, maybe 12 lectures, 15 lectures, and so on. every lecture would have a learning outcome. So if you look at it in the form of a hierarchy, every lesson has a learning outcome. That learning outcome must be aligned to the learning outcome for the course. And then all the courses in the program must be aligned to the learning outcome for the entire program. And then the learning outcome of the program must be aligned with the learning outcome of the university, must be aligned with the taxonomy that is used, must be aligned with the mission and vision of the university, and the mission and vision of the university must be aligned with what stakeholders want. For every criterion, you will see this system view that explains all the requirements within a single slide. So this is the system view for expected learning outcomes. And this is the system view for program structure and content. And this is the system view for the teaching and learning approach. Okay, so for all these slides, there are a whole series of showing what the criteria, requirements, and so on are. And then there are these. This is probably the most important slide. You look at these rectangular bubbles. Okay, requirement 1.1 says the program to show that the expected learning outcomes, that they are appropriately formulated and they are in accordance with an established learning taxonomy, and it is aligned to the mission and vision of the university, and all this is made known to the stakeholders. You look at these words that are underlined and arrowed to the rectangular bubbles. For example, the first bubble, expected learning outcomes. What are expected learning outcomes? ELOs is the totality of knowledge, skills, and attitudes, or learning outcomes that a student is expected to acquire, to master, or to perform by the end of a period of learning. Expected learning outcomes include program outcomes, course outcome, lesson learning outcomes, and so on. That is the bubble for expected learning outcome. Look at the bubble for learning taxonomy. What is a learning taxonomy? A learning taxonomy is a system to categorize or classify the domain, classify the level of a student's learning or achievement. You have rectangular bubbles for every requirement of all 8 criteria of version 4. And again, there are 52 requirements, so there are 52 of these slides showing the requirement with the rectangular bubbles explaining the requirement. This is the explanation for requirement 1.1. This is the explanation for requirement 1.2. This is the explanation for requirement 1.3. Explanation for requirement 1.4. Explanation for requirement 1.5. Explanation for requirement 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, and so on. Okay, so this is the latter part of the criteria and the sub-criteria, starting with ELO. This part now, we take it offline. We take it asynchronous. You would need to spend time, some number of hours, for example, to study, to understand. ELO, what does it consist of? Consists of formulating them, using an established taxonomy, aligning them to mission and vision of the university, and so on. Okay, this other part, you would need to study by yourself, criteria after criteria, showing all the requirements, explaining all the requirements, the explanations serve to put everyone on the same page. What does review periodically means? A review means a formal analysis, an evaluation, or an assessment, something that's systemic, something that's cyclical. Okay, so puts everyone on the same page of what the explanation is for every criterion, every requirement from 1 all the way through 8. Again, please spend some time to study all 52 requirements. Okay. Thank you very much. This marks the end of the introduction.